Hello, in this video we are going to solve 30 or more star or number pattern related problems. However, we'll not just solve them, we'll also show you how to approach the problems and how to approach problems like this so that you can solve any kind of pattern related problems. So let's start it. Oh, before starting, why this kind of patterns are important? They are important for interviews, curriculum education. Also, they are really cool. Like you just enter a value and there's a pattern. I find them very cool. I don't know about you guys. So, okay, now let's get started. So, this is our problem number one. How we can approach this problem? So at first, if you see that there are 5 rows and 5 columns, right? So the number of rows, like for first column there are 5, for second column there are 5. So basically the number of rows, the column numbers are also the same, like it's every time 5, right? Which is n, and the rows number are n total, I mean. So you can write so for row in range n, for column in range n, print star. Also need to cancel the end line from print. So what we did here, like we are thinking about one row. So when the row's value is 0, it's gonna the 0th row will print 0 to n. So it's gonna, if the n is 5, so it's going to print 0 1 2 3 4, like 5 times, right? So this is done. However, if we don't go to next line, it's gonna print like in a single line. So we just add a next line after every rows, right? So now let's run it. Sorry, it works. Okay, perfect. This is a very easy one. So let's do the second one. So this is our second question. In this, we can see that the number of columns, number of rows. These are the number of rows, and these are the number of columns. So for the first column, it's printing. So for the first row, it's printing one column. For the second row, it's printing two values which has two columns. For the third, it's so the number of the basically rows, the number of columns are being printed, right? Isn't that the case? So let's just copy the previous code. It's gonna be like a little bit changed. So this will be same for row in range n. However, for column, it's not gonna be n. What it's gonna be? For every row, it's printing that number of columns. So this value is basically row. But you know, Python starts from 0. So I guess this is going to be plus 1. No, sorry. Oh, I mean, I didn't run the second one. Yeah, that's it. This was pretty simple. Let's move on to the next question. Again, it's the inverse of it. So this is our third question. It's kind of similar. So for this, let's see, for the first column, for the first row, it's printing 5 columns. For the second row, it's printing 4. For the third row, it's printing 3. For the fourth, it's 2, and so on. Okay. So if we add this 2 and minus 1, it's going to return 5. Like 6 minus 1, 5. 6 minus 1, 5. 6 minus 1, 5. 6 minus 1, 5. Right? So now, what is the 5? The 5 is the nth value, right? And so what is this? That's mean basically row plus what's that, column plus 1 equal to n, right? Isn't that? So if we just try to find the column equal to n minus row minus 1, we just took this and this value to there. So this is our formula, right? So we try to use that. So for row in range n, for column, but column is going to be, oh yeah, so how many columns we're going to print, right? So row minus, sorry, n minus row minus 1. Is the minus 1 needed? I'm not sure actually. Yeah, it's not needed. Yeah, I'm telling you why it's not needed. It's because we are starting here from 1, right? But in Python it's actually 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So that's why the minus 1 is not needed in the code. So that was also simple. Let's move on to the fourth question. Okay, so for the fourth one, we can see that this is kind of similar to the first question. For this first, similar to the second question, right? So we just copy paste the second one. But we're printing numbers here, right? So, and what are these numbers? These are pointing to the column. Like for the first column it's 1, for the second column is 2, for the third column 3, fourth column 5. These are the numbers basically. So this is going to be, so this one is going to be row. Row actually, sorry, not row, I said column, but column can start from 0, but 0 is not here, right? So 1, column plus 1. I think this should work. Yeah, this worked. We can also add a space if we want, just to look fancy, you know. Yeah, this looks better. That's it. Now let's move on to the fifth question. If we look at this closely, so if we look closely, we have we have did this part and we have did this part, right? In the my part, in the second and third question, we actually did these two parts, right? So let's copy these two parts. But first of all, let's create pattern 5. Let's change that. So it was basically 2 and 3, right? So 2, 3. I just copied the left part, it's not needed. Now, you think this is the right code? Let's run it. This is kind of okay, but the problem is this is printing twice, right? So how we can just lessen one of them? So we can just lessen from this part or this part. Now we do this part, like we can start this from in like 1. That's it. That's you all have to do. If we don't want to start from n, I mean 1, we could also end it like -1. This same also. Okay, so this is simple, right? And what we have to do, we have to basically like find the correct formulas and what can be done to make the problem easier. Like we just added two already done problems here. So let's move on. So now for the sixth pattern, this is our pattern. We can see that we have some spaces here. Like for the first row, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. For the second, it has 3 spaces. For the third row, it has 2, 0, right? Now, if we see that for the first row, we need 4 spaces. So 1 plus 4, 5, 2 plus 3, 5 plus 2, 5. So we have a connection between these two, right? So space plus row equal to n, right? So space equal to n minus row. Simple. Also, this pattern here, it's literally the same pattern, but it has the spaces. We actually did one of this in 2. So let's copy the code of 2. But we'll add some spaces, right? So for space in range, print spaces. However, uh, what's gonna be the space? It's in minus 4. Also this one in. Let's run it. Uh, One problem there occurs is like the last one also has extra space, and this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 space, right? So we can actually fix that by adding another -1. Okay, it's correct now. Why we added one? It's again similar to the zero problem, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and starting from 0, it actually needs plus 1. So because it's 0 and 4 is less than like plus 1, you get the point. Yes. Now we try to do the 7. 7 is, we can see that, okay, so for 7 we can see that it has also spaces like this one, this one, this one. So for the first column, I mean first row, it has no space. For the second row, it has one space. Third row, it has two spaces. Fourth row, it has three spaces. And the fifth row, it has four spaces. Also, this pattern is similar to the third question. So let's copy the third code, third patterns code. Okay. However, we need to add the spaces, right? So for I in for space in range print, sorry, okay. Now what's going to be the space? Like if we see that for the first row 0, second row 0, I mean 1, third row 2, so the number of rows are basically the minus 1 is basically the number of spaces, right? Isn't it? Like for 1 it's 0, 2 minus 1 1, 3 minus 1 2. So let's put it, I think row should be enough here because it actually starts from 0. So let's just put row, and there we have it. So why we put row here? Because 0 1 2 3 4 5. You get my point. Let's now do 8 question. This is our 8 question, right? So for the first column, you can see that there are, I mean first row, there are four spaces. 1, 2, 3 for the second, I mean, and 2 for the third, 1 for the fourth, and last one. Also, we can see that the star numbers, like if we just closely look at the star numbers, first one is 1, then it's 3, 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So basically it's adding 2 every time, right? Okay, now how do we do this? One of the easier approach could be to just track how many stars we print. So for that we can have a variable star 1 for row in range. How many rows we need to print? It's always going to be n number of rows. For column in range, okay. uh Now let's just see how many columns we need to print. Here column actually means how many stars, right? So what's the star? It's the variable that we're keeping track of, right? So this value is not going to be n, it's going to be star. But if we print this, like the stars value will always be 1, right? So after printing all the stars of a row, we need to add the value. So add the value by what? It's always increasing 2 stars, right? So plus equal to, okay, let's just print this. Oh, sorry, 8. Okay, we have the stars, but there's no spaces, right? So for spaces, now how do we do the spaces? Like for the first row, it was 4, 1, 4, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3 plus 2, 5, 1 plus 4, 5. It's n, right? So the row plus space, row plus space equal to n. So space is equal to n minus row. There could be a minus 1 because we could start from 0. So n minus row minus 1. And there you have it. This is our pattern that we are looking for. Correct. Now let's move on to question number 9. Okay, for question number 9, you see that this is the inverse of the previous question. Also, there are a problem with the stars, and we cannot, like, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 9 stars at the first, then 7, then 5 stars, 3 stars, and 1 stars. So this is a pattern, right? Like it's decreasing by 2. And how do we get the 9 star first? So have a star. Let's have a star counter. So how do we get the 9 stars first? So our n is 5, right? And if we just uh, multiply it by 2, it's 10. So, and if we just do minus 1, it's 9. I think you get my point. So star is going to be n into, sorry, n into 2 minus 1. Now, okay, so now, like, do our row operations. Okay, it's going to be similar to the question number 8. I can just copy paste. But there are going to be some major changes. Like, okay, so for the row, it's going to be same. Like, we have to print 5 columns, a number of columns. Also, it's going to be changed. Talk about it later. Also, column stars, okay. However, stars should be decreasing, right? So because 9 minus 3, 1, okay. Also, how many spaces there is going to be? Like for the first row, there's no space. For the second row, there's 1. For the third row, there's 2. Fourth row, there's 4, right? Sorry, 3. And let's just clear these things. For the first row, there is no space. Second row, 1. Third row, 2. Fourth row, 3. And fifth row, 4 spaces. Right. Now, how are we going to get this number? So for the first one, row minus 1, right? Like first row, second one is 2, 2 minus 1. You get my point. But if we just start from 0, 1, 2, 3, it's going to be the rows number, right? So the spaces are row. Okay, let's print it. Okay, first write 9. You see, these are pattern, right? Simple, easy. Now let's go to 10. We can see 10 is basically the addition of 9 and 10, 8 and 9, but there's a small catch. This is just 1, like 1 time is here, like, so let's just add 9 and 8 and 9 number question. This is the 8. Sorry, this is the 9. Let's just run it. We can see that there are 2 lines. Like we need one of them, right? How can we do that? We can just erase one from this pattern, like this one. So this one, and this is done. Just simple, right? Let's move on to the next question. So far, now let's try to solve pattern 11. This is similar to the previous one we solved, the 8 number. However, if you see that the number of stars are actually increasing by 1. In question 8, it was increasing by 2. So if we just copy the 8 number question, I'm sorry, code. Okay, so you can see that we were increasing the star number by 2. It's going to be 1. Also, for aesthetic purposes, we can actually add a space. It is done. This is simple, right? Now let's do 12. 12 is actually again similar to 9. So again, copy the code of 9. Pattern 12n. But if you just see that we actually calculated the star number using a formula. However, if we see that for the first row, but if you see for the first row, it's 3, for the second row, it's 2, for the third row, it's 1, right? So basically, when the row is 1, it's 3, right? So the highest number is how many rows there will be. So the star number is going to start from basically n. The row number or n is same here, like we are using 3 as n, so it will start from n and will decrease 1. Also we can add a space, stars, and that's it. This is our 12. Now let's see 13. If you see 13, it's basically the combination of the two we actually did, 12 and 13. So let's try to do. This is 12 and this is 11. Let's run it. Well, you can see that in this pattern there's actually 1 and there's 2. Okay, so we can actually fix it. How can we fix it? We can just end it like this. Like it will go from here then to here, then it won't print this one. Or you could again do like for this, like it will start from 2. That depends. Or we can just do this one. See, it works. Now let's go to 14. Again, 14 is again literally just similar, but these two will be opposite. So we actually changed one of this here. So if we see, if we print this, oh sorry, gives me every time. If we print this, it's again the two same problem. We can just fix it by this one, and this is done. So now let's move on to 15. Okay. Okay, so for problem number 15, we can see that the problem is quite similar to question number 11. So we just copy the code of 11. Now let's print it. Okay, this is the one printed. Now if we just think about the pattern, like for the first row, it's gonna be printing the same thing like how it was printed before. Also for the last row, it's printing all of the values, right? So if we could just make conditions, like two conditions where row is basically 1 and row is basically 5, we just print stars, right? So where the stars are being printed, the stars are being printed here, right? So here we just add a if condition, if row like there isn't going to be 1, right? Like first row is actually in index 0, and or I mean row equal the last value, which is the row actually goes from 0 to n, but n is not counted, n minus 1 basically. Yeah, so n minus 1. If this happens, we'll print star. Sorry, otherwise what we are going to print, we're going to print spaces, right? Like if we just do this, we will have this one and this one. We will not have the whole code. Let's run it. Yeah, and you can see that we are having this one. But now how we print this part, right? And this part. So if we just look closely, uh, when the column numbers, like if we just think about the column numbers, right? Like the first columns of every row are stars, and last columns of every row are stars, right? And what are the column numbers here, right? Now if so, there will be like two conditions, like if the column is basically the star, I mean the start or the finish, then we are going to print star. So we can add again two more conditions, the if. So stars are basically this the we are actually keeping the star in this value. So column, if the column number actually is star, I mean column number is actually 1, then it's gonna be printing only star, right? Or column is star -1, like it won't go to star the whole star, right? Sorry, it's going to be 0 because column actually starts from 0, right? So this should work, and yeah, this actually worked. The column numbers are basically representing the star value, the star's value, right? So, and this for loop here runs for 0 1 2 3 4. So 0, and for 4 it will be printing stars. How do we get the 4? It's basically star -1. For how do we get the 3? Star -1, star -1, star -1. Okay, now let's move on to question number 16. 16 is again totally similar to the 12 number question. So let's just copy the 12 question. Here we also again put some if conditions. Like it's going to be again similar to the if conditions that we actually did. This is the row first, I mean the first row and last row. So let's just if row equals 0 or row equal n -1, or again the column equals 0 or column equal star -1, it's gonna be printing stars. Else it's gonna be printing spaces, right? It's totally similar. Sorry, it's going to be 16, right? Yeah, 16, and this is 16. Let's run it, and there we have it. It's done. Now let's move on to question 17. Question 17 is basically merging of 15 and 16, but there is a small catch. We'll go to that later, but let's just copy the codes. Let's merge these two. Right? Like if we just print this one, what will be printed? Let's see. You can see that this part here, like if we just compare it to the code here, I mean the question here, 1 2 3 4 fifth, like fifth number row is again not doing this one, right? So just let's at first remove this one. Then how can I remove this one? If we just run this loop to 0 1 2 3, just 3 times, right? And 0 to 3. So basically we're basically going to go to n -1. So then this part will be printed and this part will be printed. Like let's see. Yeah, this is printed. But now what we have to do is for the so this part is the second, basically this one, right? So now we have to remove this part. Now where was this part printed? This part was basically printed for this this is the reason it's been printed, right? How we can remove this? So how we can remove this? What was the reason? What is the reason this is being printed, right? So for it was being printed because for the rows value 0, right? So if we just cancel out the rows value 0 from the conditions, let's see what happens. See, this is done. So this part and this part is executed, but this part is not executed. That's it. We just finished the 17 code. Now let's move on to 18. 18 is very similar to question number 1, but there is a small catch. For 18, we first need to make the where these are all filled, right? So let's do that first. Let's copy the code number 1. It's quite similar. Sorry, it's basically not 19, it's 18. Yeah, but the problem is for the first row it's printing 4, and every time it's printing 4 columns, right? So column is basically less than 1. Yeah, we did this. Now how do we hollow this, right? Not print the middle values. So for that we use again the if conditions, where the value should be, I mean for the where the star should be printed. So for row, if we just draw it, okay, so if we just draw this, like where the stars are not going to be printed here, right? So you can see for row 0, for row 1 and row 5 it's same. So let's write that row. So first row is basically 0, or row equal so on. Again, the code actually goes through n but not n. Also, these values are basically for first column and last column, right? Oh, sorry, this one is not 4, it's 4. So what is the column's value? 0, or column, well, what's the last column? Like 4, right? N's value was basically n, and it was 5, so it's basically n minus 1. But you can see our column actually goes through n minus 1, so it's going to be n minus 2. Else we're going to print spaces. Oh, sorry, there should be space. Yeah, that's it. That's how we do question number 18. Now let's move on to 19. So this is actually a rhombus, right? This is exactly similar to the question we just for like the it's similar to question 1, but there is a small catch. We are talking about that later, but let's just copy the code of 1. Let's just run it first. You can see that this is totally the stars number and other things are similar, but here there are 4 spaces, 3 spaces, 2 spaces, 1 spaces. This, so there is a space, right? So for space in range. Now what should be the space number? So if we just draw this, okay, so for the first row there are 1 2 3 4 spaces. For the second row, 1 2 3 1 2 1 2. And for the fourth row there's 1, and fifth row there is no spaces, right? So how can we do that? So if we just make a formula here, like uh so this is row plus space equal to what? It's 4 and 1 5. What is 5? 5 is basically n, so space is basically n minus row. Simple. N minus row. However, we can see that it will be starting from 0, so we just add additional -1. And that's it. This is the code for question number 19. Now question number 20 is again the hollow of the previous question 19. So these values are hollow, right? So let's just do it. Copy and paste the 19, 20 and 20. So there, like for every star we need to check if the star is going to be printed or not, like, so where the stars are going to be printed. So if we just draw here, you can see that these values are not going to be printed, right? Now this one here, sorry, this one and this one are untouched. What are these? These are the row 0, I mean the first row and last row, right? So let's do it. Row equal 0 or row equal -1. So for that we'll be printing stars. Okay, let's run it. Yeah, we just did this. However, we didn't print this one. Now what are these? These are basically first column and last column, right? So again, two conditions, or column equal. What's the first column, right? So the first column is basically 0, or column last column is n -1. And that's it. Let's run it. Yeah, this is totally right. So this is how you can solve pattern questions. Now let's move on. So now let's try to do 21. So if we see the question 21, we can see we have like this looks very complicated, right? Like, how is this pattern even made? But if we look closely, we actually have did some subparts of it, right? Like, let's just copy it. So here we can see that we already have made this, made this, made this part, oh sorry, did this part and this part, right? They are basically this one, and this one, right? So how do I build the first one? So this one, and the under one should be this one, right? So let's just copy 3 and 2. Oh, first of all, let's get pattern 21, and so 3 and 2. This one's 3 and this one's 2, right? So if we print this, we should get this first part here. Oh, sorry, 21. Yeah, we kind of got the first part, but there are, like, is there two of them? Oh yeah, there is two of them, so we don't need to remove this. Now we somehow have to print this right thing simultaneously with the uh, uh first one, right? But let's just try to print this part. Let's try that. Like, which are these questions? So this part is basically 7 and which one? 7 and 7 and is it? Oh, 7 and 6. My bad, my bad. Yeah. So let's copy 7. 6. Oh no. First we have to copy 7, right? Yeah. Let's copy 7. And then copy 6. If we print this, you can see that it just prints like next line, not simultaneously. Why is that? Because we are running 4 loops. We need to do these things in 2 loops, right? So how can we do that? Like, after this one, we should continue to print, right? And we should have like this one printed after this, right? So we just cut it and paste it here. Like, also we need to print once, right? Then this part should be printed with this part, right? And only one print. So, and this loop should be removed. Now, you think this should work? Let's see. Why is that happening, right? Now, if you just see closely, this space and this space here puts like goes after this one, right? So after this there was no space, but they have like a gap between this, right? So they just fill this gap with the spaces. So if we just double up the spaces, what will happen? Like, there will this space will be created, and again this space will be created. This space will be created, and this space again will be created. That's basically solves our problem, right? See, it is done. So how did we manage to solve a problem like this? We just added a bunch of already done things. We literally did not do anything. Now let's try to do 22. 22 is basically the sum up of 6 and 7. Let's do it. Where is 6? And 7 is here. Let's just run it. It kind of works, but you know, the problem is it's printing twice, but it should print once. So how can we get rid of it? We can just remove one from this part. So just remove one row, and that's it. That's our 22. Now let's try to do 23. We did 22 because in 23 we'll need this, right? So what's here? We have already done this part and this part in the previous question. So we need to add these two so that they print simultaneously, right? So let's try to do that. Oh, sorry, 3, and this should be n. So this part is basically question 5, right? Yeah. Let's go to question 5. Copy it, paste it here. Like this will print the left part. Yeah, this is the left part, and this here is the right part. Let's print that. But the problem is they're printing after the first one is printed. We need to print them simultaneously, right? So how can we do that? We just need to with this part we also need to print this part, right? So let's just copy it and paste it right here, and we need to print once, right? Also copy it, remove it, and paste it here. Remove the other but here again we'll have the same problem, like space for spaces. Let's see what's the problem. Like you can see that these spaces are basically the fillers, right? Because they didn't start from here, like these ones didn't start from here. That's why these spaces are actually fillers. So if we just again add the spaces loop for each of them, then they'll now start from here, so it will be in the perfect order. See, this is our pattern right here. So now we can move to pattern 24. In 24 it's 22 but hollow, right? So at first just copy the 22. Now how do we like do the hollow stuffs? Like how do we solve for the hollow stuffs? So for that, let's see where the stars are being printed. Let's just draw it first, it will be easier. So let's just think of this one, like where there is fillers, like as we started, like this ends in -1, so this part is responsible for printing this part, right? So this is the part that's been printed for the first loop. So now if we just think here, what we have to remove? We have to remove this one, and this one, right? How can we remove that? This is basically row 1 and this is row 0. I mean, sorry, row number n minus 1. Now the problem is this part. This part is nothing but column, I mean first columns, and these are the last columns, right? So if we just write the if conditions, if so row can be 1 or oh, this part is not like not clean, so we don't need this one. So the row part is done, row is only once, and column equal what should be the column? So the oh sorry, not 1, basically it's 0 because the indexes start from 0. A column should be at 0, or column can be the last, I mean the last column can be also the answer. Now you can see the column, last column is can be row, so column equal row. Now if they are not in the condition, we should print space, right? If we just print it, you can see we have did it. Now we need to do the same thing for the bottom part, but this part should also be removed, this part should be removed, and this part should be removed. This one is untouched and columns are untouched. So what is this row? It's basically last row, right? So we again put the if conditions here. If row equal the last row, right, n minus 1. Here you can see the rows goes through n but not including n, so last row is n minus 1, or or columns can be 0, or columns can be uh one. Oh sorry, the last column, right? So you can see the columns goes through n minus 1, n minus row, right? So n minus row minus 1 is the last column, else it should print space. It should be working, and it does. It wasn't that much difficult. You just need to figure out which columns are needed and which columns are not, and which rows are needed and which rows are not. Let's try to do 25 now. 25 is again very similar to, which one was that? 5. Let's copy the code of 5. Div pattern 25, and let's just print it. We can see this is not hollow, of course. The if conditions are more or less similar with the previous one, so we just write it. If again the reasons are basically same with the previous ones, let's just copy it. For the next part, here should work. Let's see. Okay, there are some problems. Let's see what did we go wrong. So there is no else part. What did I even copy? I don't know. Okay, it actually worked. Like the whole thing actually is same as the 24 number question. So if you want to know how we did it, check out the 24 number. Now let's try to do 26. 26 is literally 25 plus 24, but we have to do them simultaneously, right? Let's just write it first. So first will be the 25 number, right? Yeah, 25, and then 24. But we will actually encounter a problem. We'll see that. The problem is they are not done simultaneously, right? How can we do them simultaneously? We can see that this part or this part should be added with this part, right? And this part is basically this part of coding. So we just cut it and paste it right here. We print once, like the print line should be once, because we do the simultaneously and go to the next line, right? Again, this part should be added with the upper part. You think this should work, but there should be a problem. Yes, because again the space problem, because this is happening because when we were doing this part of the code, the starting was plain, like a single line, but here these space are fillers. These are the space that are being printed, so we need to just do the spaces again, I mean twice, and this should do our job, and we can see it matches with the pattern. Pretty cool. Now let's try to do 27. Okay, now 27 can be done in many ways, but one of the easiest way is to add two triangles, like what we did before in, let's see, we did all triangles, right? Like 16 and 15. If we add these two, we'll kind of get a thing like this, but not exactly. Just let's add them first. 16 and 15. Let's just do that. 16 and 15. Okay, if we print this, we kind of have it, but this is the problem. Now, for the first part of it, what is this? These are row 0, first row, and this is last row. Why these stars are being printed? They're printed because we added this part. So if we just remove this part, this should not be printed. Okay, we did this. Now, for this part, this is the reason they are being printed, because the last row, let's remove it. Okay, again we have this, there is 2, but in the pattern we can see 1. What we can easily do is like just remove 1. and that's it. This runs for this period of time, and the second loop runs this one. That's how we do it. Very easy. We just added two already done things. Let's try 28. Now in 28 you can see like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10, like the numbers are increasing, right? Like this is not any column or row, but we actually did something like this, which is a star pattern, and it's number 2, right? So we just, let's first copy the number 2 one. Okay, number 2. Now the problem is number 2 will print all the stars. We need to print numbers here, right? So we need to print numbers, also a space. So how can we track the numbers, right? So we can just start, make a variable, and every time it will start from 1, right? So 1, and after every iteration the numbers should be increasing by 1, and we should print number. That's it. It should be working fine. Yes, it works fine. Let's try it with 4. Yeah, it works fine. Maybe there is 2 spaces. Let's see. Yeah, 2 spaces works. That's it. Let's try 29. 29 is very similar to the last pattern we did. Let's again copy everything, the previous one. But the problem is we will not be adding 1. Let's just print this one first. Oh, sorry, it should be 29. There should be 1 everywhere, right? And so how do we change the value? So after every 1 it should be 0. So of the first iteration the number is 1. So if number equal 1, what should we do? We change it to 0. Then 0 prints. Then what would be printed? 1. So else if number equal 0, number should be 1, right? But if we notice 1 1 0 1 0 1, the next number should again be 0, but every time the row is started the numbers are 1, right? So after every columns loop, if we just go out of it, number should be 1. This is all we have to do for this problem. Let's see if it works, and it works like a charm. Let's try to do it 5. It is done. Let's now do number 30. If pattern 30. Okay, this is again very similar to a star pattern. Let's see which one was that. It's 3. Let's copy the code of 3. Now let's print it. Okay, it's, why do I make this problem time? Okay, now the main problem here is, what are these numbers, right? What are these numbers even denoting? It's very easy. 1 means first row, 2 second row, 3 third row. It's basically pointing out the row number, nothing else. So instead of stars, we'll be printing row. And for aesthetic purpose, let's just add a space, and this should be done. But I actually forgot about it. Rows can start from 0, right? Like 0 to, so just +1, and this is done. Pretty easy, cool. Now let's do the last one, 31. Now we might know this pattern. This is Pascal's triangle. We all know how this works, but let's just summarize how it works. Like for the first row, it's 1, then 1 1, then addition of these two and 1 1, then addition of these two here and addition of these two here, again addition of these two here, addition of these two here, addition of these two here. So this is how it goes, right? So for this pattern we cannot actually do it in the normal way. At first we just create a list and store all these values. Like there is a list, and first one can be 1, then should be 1 1, then 1 2 1, I don't know, and so it should be a list in a list, right? So if we just have the numbers, we can print them easily. That wouldn't be a problem, but we need to actually see what are the numbers. So let's create a list, L empty list. Now for I in range should run till n, and for j in range, for every operation we should actually create a temporary array or list which should be added in this list later, right? So what do we exactly do here? Like what should we put in this? So we can see these values are always 1 and these values are always 1. What are these? If we, and we should run this till I plus 1. There is a reason behind that, I'll say you later. But now these values are always 1, right? So when they are 1, when j's value is 0 and j's value is the last one, or I, because I just put it I plus 1. And what is, we can think of this as columns and this as rows. So if j equal 0 or j equal I, just we first append in the temporary list t dot append append 1. Else what we should have, we should append, we should be appending these values. How do we get these values? Okay, now we know we have to append something, but what should we append? Like if you just notice, after this and this, two lists would be created, 1 and 1 1, then 1 will be put it automatically, but these two should be coming from these two values, right? What are these two? How can we reach these two values? At the third, what is that called, list, the index should be 2. I mean the j's index should be 2, and I should be, I guess I'm a little bit wrong. We just think like that. If else, so what should be done? Like this value and this value, we need to access this somehow, right? So for this 0, this one row, this second row, so i's value and j's value should be 0, 1. So I equal to j equal 1. So, and this one is 0, 1. So we need to somehow make I equal 1 and j equal 0 so that we can access this value, right? So how do we do that? So I minus 1 for that and j minus 1. So I minus 1, j minus 1. Also, we need to add another value with it. How do we get the next value? So you can see I should be same. I should be same. I minus 1. But instead of minusing j, it should only be j. And it should be done. After every rows operation, we should append, l dot append. We need to put the temporary array inside the main array. So t, let's just print the l first. Let's see if we are even doing it the right way. 1 and this should be 5. There's a problem. Oh, let's put n here. 1 1 1 1 2 1 1 3 3 1 1 4 6 4 1. So this is working pretty nicely. Now we need to print these numbers, right? So for I, so let's just use row and column. So for row in range n and for column in range row plus 1. Why row plus 1? Because the number of rows are actually the number of columns we have, right? For the first row we have 1, but 0 can be also a row. So how many, which row we are in, that many columns are there. That's why row plus 1. So we print, what we print? L of row column. And if we just do this, we will have a problem, but let's see what's the problem. We have the numbers and everything. The problem is these spaces are not here. So we again need to make a space loop for space in range. Now, how many spaces do we need to print? It's again kind of very similar to other questions that we solved, but let's again do it. For the first row, 1 2 3 4 spaces. Second row, 2 3 spaces. So if we just add the space and this value, I mean number of values here, So space plus row equal n. So space is equal to n minus row. So n minus row, and there can be zero number of index, so 1. What should we do? Print a space, and this should be working. Also, we can add a space for aesthetic purpose. Let's see. And there we have it. Clean Pascal's triangle. So there we have it. We have solved 31 problems, and I think these 31 problems can help you solve any kind of pattern problems. Well, I tried to show you how to approach these problems and how we can add 2 or 3 problems or more to solve bigger problems. I hope this will help you. Thank you for watching. See you again next time.